Hello, and welcome to the Argyle Future Work Summit. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we'll turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we would like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Workday. Our sponsor is committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please use the hashtag ArgyleDigital and follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum. Also, be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I would like to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we have curated based on the feedback we have received over the years from our members. We have worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thanks again for joining us today. Now, let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Taisha Amen, Diversity and Inclusion Lead, Humana. We are so excited to have Taisha for an opening keynote presentation titled Skills-Based Hiring, Creating Opportunities and Promoting Diversity. Welcome, Taisha. Over to you.
Hello. Thank you so much, Nick. Hi, thank you for spending some of your morning with me. I'm delighted to be speaking on a topic that I am so passionate about, skills-based hiring. I'm Taisha Amen, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leader at Humana. I specialize in inclusive talent strategy, identifying systemic barriers and creating solutions so all our talent can thrive. I am also a talent management consultant. I'm speaking to you today from Boston, Massachusetts, the land of the Massachusetts Wampanoag, Pawtucket, and Nipmuc people. We know that the land acknowledgements are not enough to begin to rectify the legacy of harm on our Native American and Indigenous communities, but I encourage you to find ways to work in solidarity with them and research what land you stand on. So for today's discussion, we're going to be talking about the future of work. What is it and why does it matter? A brief timeline of how we got here, today's workforce, the benefits of adopting a skills-first approach, creating a skills-based culture, and some key takeaways. So simply put, the future of work is a projection of how organizations, the workers, and the workplace will evolve in the years ahead, considering technological factors, the labor market, and social cultural shifts. The future of work is an important consideration for everyone who participates in our economy, especially leaders and HR professionals, because the future of work will have a major impact on talent acquisition, so how you recruit and select your talent, skills-based hiring, talent development, your internal mobility strategies, employee engagement that has a symbiotic relationship with inclusion, workforce planning, and retention, which is our North Star. So it behooves all of us to really stay informed of the latest trends and developments in the future of work, so we can ensure that our organizations are well positioned to succeed in a rapidly changing job market. And so as you can see here, there's been an explosion of buzzwords and terms. Some are old and some of them are new, right? But most of them have come to the forefront of this conversation in regards to our workforce and the future of work. And oftentimes you see like a tension, like collision and cohesion amongst these ideas. So in this rapidly changing technological and social environment, where the demand for skilled workers has grown exponentially in tandem with new cultural shifts, it's really important that leaders start to think broadly about skills, closing the talent gap, while understanding the cultural landscape to retain a diverse workforce. So one way to do that is to prioritize skills over degrees and to take a skills-first approach. But a skills-first approach is not enough. You have to build a culture around skills-based hiring, one that is based on inclusion. So before we get into the harder discussion, I always love to get grounded in the history of all things to understand how we got here. Could we have taken a better path, right? Because history allows us to see, highlights our greatest pitfalls and allows us to discover some of our greatest solutions. So when you look at this timeline, pre-industrial revolution, the American labor market was based on agriculture and physical labor. A lot of that labor was from enslaved Africans, sharecroppers, farmers. Bodily strength was prioritized. Being able-bodied, which is a privilege, was your qualification over any education or any specialized skills. Able-bodied men, women, and children worked on farms and were needed to pick cotton, plow corn, wheat fields, churn butter, etc. So with the rise of industrialization, there was a shift to machinery and production. Think of all the warehouses that exploded in every major city, especially in places like Providence, Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit. There was an increased demand for specialized skills and knowledge, particularly in the fields such as mechanical engineering, mechanics, machine operations. So many workers needed to acquire new skills and knowledge in order to succeed in these industries. And there was a greater emphasis on apprenticeships and training, however, not a formal education as in a college degree. Then after World War II, there was a significant expansion of the middle class and a growing emphasis on higher education. So this led to a shift of white-collar jobs and a greater demand for skilled professionals, particularly in finance, healthcare, and technology. White-collar jobs referring to non-manual jobs, those that place people in an office setting. So there was this growing distinction between white-collar and blue-collar working class. Now, if you even think of the term white-collar, which referred to white pressed collared shirts, kind of like the one I have on, and office workers, it's not even really relevant anymore. Right now, if you go to tech-oriented organizations, you see folks dressing up in hoodies, beanies, Chuck Taylors, right? So you see how the cultural impact really impacts the future of work. You see how those things come together. And so now to present day in the technological revolution and the present era. In recent decades, there has been a shift towards a knowledge-based economy with the advent of the computer, which places a greater emphasis on education, knowledge, and specialized skills. And this really fundamentally changes the way that we really think about who is qualified and what is a marker for qualification. I actually learned a quick fact the other day that the qualification of a college degree on job descriptions were simply put there to determine who knew how to use a computer. That's it. It was just to field out, the competition, to say, all right, how do we start to stratify and create a more narrow talent pool? And I'd say the majority of Americans know how to use a computer. So, it was kind of like this arbitrary barrier that we put in place. So you see how the tech sector is transforming the way that we work with in-demand skills, such as programming languages, cloud computing, data analytics, cybersecurity, AI, and machine learning, and impacting the social impact, who's qualified. And then also causing degree inflation. And when I mean degree inflation, I mean that putting a college degree as a minimum requirement on every single role, even if it has no bearing on the role itself. And how does that impact our workforce and our future workforce? I think of my own life. I got married and had my first child while in college. And I had to work while going to school to support my family. And I remember looking for jobs that I knew I was qualified for: customer service, call center, admin roles, that I had past experience doing, but I couldn't land these jobs despite having previous experience because I didn't have my degree yet, although I was in college. So this creates a bias and a barrier in the hiring process. So our current system shuts people out instead of screening people in. And we are kind of implicit into this problem because we're creating these barriers. Jobs are open longer. There's an increased pressure on current workers, a loss of productivity and engagement, along with a negative socioeconomic impact that it has on society as a whole. So I want to look at data, and I want to ask you, is our current system working? Because the data is telling. 67% of Americans don't have a degree. That means 2/3 of Americans are shut out of often high-earning, high-potential opportunities, the thing that allows for economic mobility. And there's also this false dichotomy that low-wage workers are also low-skilled workers, but that's not the case. We are not allowing for the free flow of talent, specifically STARS, and that's talent skilled through alternative routes. We are also stifling creativity and innovation. So opportunity insights at Harvard University, at Harvard Business School specifically, provided data that suggests that if women, minorities, and children from low-income families invent at the same rate as high-income white men, the innovation rate in America would quadruple. That means we would have 4 times the rate of innovation. And right now, we can barely keep up. We don't even have enough workers to meet the demand of our technology sector over the next 10 years and more. Add the fact that COVID-19 created a huge disruption in our education system. We're potentially looking at a loss of learning, and more students are reconsidering even getting a college degree. We must drive progress and we must drive change. Skills-based hiring is just one of the many solutions that allows us to stay on pace with the future of work in terms of learning, development, creativity, and innovation. So I want you to take a look at this map here, which reflects the geography of upward mobility in the United States. And you can see that opportunity is unequally distributed based on region. And unfortunately, the quality of the education you receive in America is based on your region down to your zip code in the same state. If you even look a little closer, what do you see? You realize that regions that are geographically dense with Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, and Latinx people are also highly impacted and have low upward mobility, often downward mobility. If education is a great equalizer, then skills-based hiring is a tool to create more opportunity and equity, and frankly, it's our social responsibility. All right, so let's take a pause because that was a lot of me talking, and I want to hear from you. Let's take a look at our polling results. All right, so polling question 1. Please indicate the extent to which you agree with the following statement. Our organization is mainly focused on skills-based hiring to secure new talent. So we have 50% say agree and 16.67% say strongly agree. I think that's a high number. Oh, but equally, 16.67% disagree. At least no one disagrees at all, right? So we have 0% strongly disagree. I'm glad to see that at least some of your organizations are focused on skills-based hiring. Number 2, what are the main benefits of skills-based hiring? Please select all that apply. All right, so the majority of people here said it secures more experienced, qualified talent. I would agree with that. It also does open up the pool of talent, promotes hiring diverse candidates, improves employee retention, none of the above. Well, I think that you're the right crowd because we're right on track, and we're going to talk about the benefits of skills-based hiring. So some of the benefits: reducing barriers to entry. A skills-based workforce can help to reduce barriers to entry for candidates who may not have traditional educational qualifications, but possess necessary skills. Think about my own story, right? This increases a pool of available talent and helps to fill positions that would otherwise be left unfilled. And we know that there are 10 million open roles right now in the United States. But most importantly, it allows you to select the best qualified candidate, one that can actually do the work based on experience. It promotes internal mobility. And I think that this is really important, and it goes back to that quote about associates, your employees, being a renewable asset. So it's important to invest in training and development programs and to close the talent gap by building and developing the skills and knowledge of existing employees and promoting internal mobility. And this is one that I feel very strongly about because it's easy to say, hey, we're going to source externally. Let's throw some more money. Let's hit HBCUs and HSIs and let's try to get some more diversity. But it's harder when you say, hey, let's promote internal mobility, because that's when you start to look at the systemic barriers, the systems, the processes that are in place that may be actually creating a barrier for the free flow of talent within your organization. But that's where the real change begins. You can tap into a broader range of talent. A skills-based workforce can help to tap into a broader range of talent, including candidates who may not have pursued a college degree or traditional career path. Think about STARS. So it does help increase diversity in the workforce and bring in perspectives and ideas. You think of all those individuals who do not apply to jobs because it says requires a degree, a bachelor's degree, maybe a master's, even a PhD. So many people that we are shutting out who are highly qualified, and improves retention. There's actually data that suggests that individuals who come through skills-based hiring, those who do not have a four-year college degree, that actually stay longer in their roles. So we're helping reducing turnover and all the associated costs with recruiting and training new employees, especially if you go through things like apprenticeships. So creating a skills-based culture. First, you have to create the business case. And I think one of the main things is cost savings, right? I think all leadership wants to hear is how much can we save? So what does it do? It reduces recruitment and training costs by hiring candidates who already possess the skills and knowledge, right? So that time to hire, that time to productivity, that closes, that's a huge marker that we at least use to determine cost to hire. So we look at, time to productivity. You want to define the organization's talent needs. You want to conduct a skills gap analysis to identify areas where the organization is lacking in specific skills or knowledge, or where there's areas of opportunity. So even potentially looking at reducing contractor reliance, right? Not even opening new FTEs, saying, okay, well, maybe we can take this set of roles and replace them, maybe through our internal mobility strategies, maybe taking people from the call center or warehouses or that, and creating a path for them. You have to identify the roles to remove degree requirements. And for this, you'll have to work with your compensation partners, your legal team, and leaders to identify the roles where degrees are unnecessary. And you want to revamp the recruitment process. So you want to change your sourcing strategies around and expand where you look for talent and how you look for talent, right? Considering those who may have certifications, boot campers, and not just college recruitment. You want to move towards assessments, maybe case studies, and changing job descriptions to reflect inclusive language. So if you look at IBM does this really well in terms of creating a skills-based culture and skills-based hiring. But you also want to create an inclusive workforce strategy. And so aside from the job descriptions, you also want to look at areas where you see stagnant growth. Like I said, the call center, the warehouses, your hourly employees, and create apprenticeships, rotational programs that allow them to build skills around the organization, leadership skills that they'll need to move to the next level. And change management. I think that with any great change, you have to have a really robust change management strategy. One that just doesn't start and end with the implementation, but one that is ongoing. So you want to celebrate wins. Everybody loves a good story, but back it up with data and provide mentorship to managers so they can lead, develop, and coach employees who are stars. And so we have to kind of look at it from all these areas. But at the center of it, you have your leadership, who not only need to be sponsors of this work and give it their blessing, but they need to be influencers. They need to be promoting skills-based culture. They need to be highly visible and speaking of this on a regular basis, because this is a top-down approach initiative. I recently had the pleasure of hearing from the CEO of Yum Brands, and he was explaining how many of the members of his C-suite do not have college degrees. He's modeling behavior in his selection process and promoting a skills-based culture. And when people see that, when managers see that, they're more invested, they're involved, they know that this is a culture shift. And so what are the key takeaways? That skills-based hiring is smart business. Employers pay up to 30% more for college graduates, despite observing no difference in job performance between graduates and non-graduates. We know that the future of work is upon us. We know that we don't even have the skills that we need to meet our technology. And so upskilling and reskilling every available talent that we have, that is really necessary. Broaden your talent pool. The success of your organization starts and stops with your talent. Your talent is literally the heartbeat of your organization. And it is so important that you are able to identify all the talent, all the skills necessary, and bring them on board. it actually would be foolish to not do that, right? Skills-based hiring also allows you to increase diversity. When you eliminate degree requirements and focus on the competencies and skills required, you encourage women and historically underrepresented and historically excluded people talent to apply where they may have not. And it also promotes equity. It's like I was saying, it's our social responsibility, but not only that, creating equity within your organization with those internal mobility strategies and not creating a paper ceiling, not allowing for there to be stagnation even within your own company. So really creating a specialized career path forward for those individuals that do come in through the door. So it's really full circle from the recruitment aspect to growth and development and continual improvement, that mentorship, that development with your managers and so forth. Because it, like I said, it's about creating a skills-based culture, not just about skills-based hiring. So any questions? Well, I appreciate you all for spending this time with me and Argyle for this opportunity. I urge you to continue the conversation and continue our goal for a more equitable workforce. Skills-based hiring is just one part of the solution, but it's a big part of the solution. So let me just take a look here. Let's look at some of the questions in the chat. How are organizations continuing to focus on hiring diverse candidates, and what should their priorities be? This is a great question. And so when I look at hiring diverse candidates, I always say that inclusion is the goal and diversity is going to be the outcome. So we do want to create a more diverse workforce. We want to look at organizations and we want to see diversity throughout every level of leadership. We want to see that. But I really urge you to focus on your systems and your processes and not the people. Because when you focus on your systems and your processes, what you'll find out is that, wow, there's actually systemic barriers like those job descriptions, like your manager's mindset, hiring manager's mindset that are saying, hey, I want someone with a college degree. Or when you look at the biases like me bias or similarity bias, affinity bias, you start to see how those are at work and how they start to create barriers. So absolutely, when you're setting your priorities, if diversity is the outcome, if that's what your goal is, then you want to look at your hiring process to create an inclusive hiring process. So that starts with your recruiters and their sourcing strategies, how they present the company, because they're often the first person that your candidates will speak to, but also making sure that you have a very equitable process. I hope that answers your question. All right. Is there ever any reluctance from teams moving away from hiring candidates with hiring education versus skill only? Absolutely, yes. So I have had managers, when we've removed degree requirements, say things like, yeah, that's nice, but I'm still going to hire someone with a degree. And I think that a lot of that is based on a lot of things. One, because people are scared to change. They think that if they change the way that they've thought or the way that they've always hired, that there's going to be some negative impact because they think that there's some type of risk, attached to that. So absolutely, I've had people push back on skills-based hiring. But I think that one of the greatest things that you can do is really change the process. And yes, so you have those hiring managers that say, no, I don't want to do it. And I think it's really important to really dig down, build a relationship and create trust where you can kind of find out what is the main issue. Right? Is it a bias? Is it something like, fear of making a mistake, a fear of hiring the wrong person? Is it something like time to productivity? So I think that changing the way that we hire talent, and I think that there was another question about current assessments, what type of assessment? So I really urge you to kind of look at the assessments depending on what they are and say, okay, well, is there bias that exists in this assessment? And make sure that when you have a team reviewing these assessments, that is a diverse team. So you have multiple perspectives coming to the table saying, yeah, and take the assessment yourself. So it's funny because I was a technical recruiter for a while. And I had a hiring manager that I worked with quite often, and he was a stickler for hiring really, like he wanted the best talent and he had the hardest interview. But you know what? I was like, can you answer this coding challenge? And he had the hardest time. And I think that at that moment, he realized that he was setting the bar way too high, even for himself. Let's see here. What other questions do we have? All right, I see a question here. How do you motivate employees to take advantage of training opportunities? That's a great question. I think that it is depending on how your organization is, but that's up to managers. That's up to managers, your communication teams. But I think that managers are the key here. Identifying the talent that they think that, hey, you know what, based on your performance, based on your experience, your skills, those things, I think that you are best qualified for these training opportunities. But there has to be some incentive, right? Transparency is so big. Understanding what is the outcome of this, right? Is it higher pay? Is it a leadership opportunity? Is it additional visibility? So I think that you have to tie those training opportunities to several different other things, other incentives, whether it's higher pay, whether it's a greater visibility, if it's leadership skills, whatever it is. But it's really up to the manager to be fostering that conversation with the employees so they can take advantage of that training. Do you think talent workplaces are the way to get at hiring skills for internal, external candidates? Have you used any vendor systems to help with this? No vendors or systems come to mind specifically, but most ATS systems, I know that Workday is a sponsor of this conversation. They do have some tools within there that you can utilize to start to build out your skills-based hiring process. But I think that it is definitely something that if you have a team in place that you can build out. Starting with things like, okay, well, where are we sourcing? Working with your compensation partner, things like, and identifying, can we remove those degree requirements off of the job description? And then doing that change management process with your hiring managers, understanding, okay, well, now we're going to actually reassess how we evaluate our candidate, and we're going to use a different method to bring them in. Okay, let me see. I think we can get maybe one more question here. Does promoting skills-based hiring actually attract more talent? Absolutely, it does. So there's so much data that also suggests, even in terms of women, how women are least likely to apply to roles if they don't meet all of the qualifications. That's not only for women, it's also for historically excluded talent as well. And so when you go from a skills-based hiring approach and you say, you know, maybe even if you say education or comparable experience, or you just remove that degree requirement, yes, your talent pools will increase for sure. And I'm happy to send out some resources at the end of this as well.
Thank you again, Taisha, for an excellent keynote. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for spending time with me. Thank you, Argo.